Today is Wednesday, April 19th, 2017, and this is your Lake of the Ozarks fishing report. It's also a Big Bass Bash, pre-Big Bass Bash fishing report for those of you getting ready to fish the bash this weekend. So this is a report for the Upper Lake area, courtesy of Joe's Lake Ozark Guide Service. Right now in the Upper Lake area, the lake is still sitting around 4 feet below summer pools, so it's basically where it's been for the last couple weeks. It is rising slightly each day, about a tenth each day, but it's pretty much staying at the same level, and it's going to stay at that same level. Even with the rain we have coming in, it'll stay at that same level through this weekend for the Big Bass Bash. Water temperature in the mornings was about 63 degrees, getting up to about 65 to 67. So we're looking at mid 60s is water temperature right now. So what that means as far as the bass fishing goes in the Upper Lake area, the bass are spawning. We've got bass on spawning beds. They're in behind the docks, they're underneath the dock cables, underneath the dock runways. They're even in some of those spawning areas that are not by the docks, where you can find just little bowls or indentations or shallowed out areas along the bank when you get into some of these little pea gravel pockets. That's kind of what the bass are doing as far as spawning. Not all the bass are spawning, so there are still some bass hanging out on the channel banks, the pre-spawn bass. So if you're going to be fishing the Big Bass Bash this weekend, and you want to catch a big fish, unless you can sight fish and actually see a big fish on a bed, your best bet's probably to go for those pre-spawners, which are going to be on those channel banks and those secondary points that are just outside of those spawning pockets. Also, we're getting about that time where a lot of the main lake, bigger fish on the main lake areas might moving up on some of the main lake spawning areas. So look at some of those pockets off the main river channel that maybe go back about 50 to 100 yards. Didn't see too many of those fish this morning when we were out, but by the weekend, without any major cold fronts coming through, some of those fish could move up, because usually this is about the time of year that those main lake fish start gravitating towards those banks. Water temperature on the main lake is about a degree or two cooler than it is back in the creeks. So that's kind of what's going on with the bass, and I'll give you my hints and tips on strategy for the Big Bass Bash here in a minute. All right, here's what we're catching fish on right now. Today had a guide trip today. We fished for spawning fish basically in and behind the docks. Went out this morning, caught a quick limit, and then one of the guide trip I had today, the guy was with me, caught one really nice one, about a 4.5 pounder, and we were catching pretty much everything on jigs. Basically, most of the fish came on a jig. This is a Crocker Gator Zapper jig. Ozark craw's the color. It's green, brown with some black. I use a on the trailer. It really doesn't matter. Choose your personal favorite, but I think as the water temperature is warmer, you want to use one that the flappers are pretty aggressive, And so when you're pitching in behind these docks, the water is really not that dirty for this time of year, considering for the Upper Lake area. You can see down about a foot. And a couple of places we went to today, I could actually see the bed. Couldn't see the fish sitting on the bed, but I could see the round circle of the spawning bed that the fish had made. And so pitch a jig in there, and one of the males picked it up immediately and started swimming off with it pretty aggressively. So you'll kind of come into some of those. So if you're getting that happening to you and you want to look for some of those bigger females, as those males are there building that nest, they're going to be just kind of sitting off the very back of that dock if that bed is behind the dock, and that female is going to be on the back of that dock. So you want to pitch in those dark holes in around the backs of those docks and just try to catch some of those bigger females. Also caught some fish on small worm, like a Cinco type worm, just rigging it on a regular jig head, just like a jig worm technique. Caught some fish doing that, but our biggest bites and biggest fish today came off the jig. Now, strategy as far as the Big Bass Bash goes. The best time for you to catch a big fish is early in the morning, because those big fish are going to move up low light hours. It might be raining this weekend, so that might add some cloud cover, might keep those fish shallower. Although with all the people that's going to be fishing on the lake, fishing pressure has a lot of times has a tendency to push those fish deeper. So your best chance to catch a big one is usually early. And the best time to do that, for me, the best lure to use is a buzz bait. You can cover a lot of water with it. It's a big fish bait, and if you do catch one on a buzz bait this time of year, it's usually a pretty good one. And you want to throw these on anywhere where you think these fish are going to move in to spawn. You can throw them in the spawning pockets, throw it on main lake points. especially some of these areas where there's big rocks in the water and these fish kind of hang out by these big rocks. And anything, lay down logs, back corners of docks, underneath dock runways, if you're brave enough to throw these in and behind the cables, fish it slow. The bait I like to fish is a crocodigator head knocker buzz bait, and I've showed this to you before, but what's so ideal about the head knocker, it has a flat head, so it has a tendency to plane and get up on surface a little easier. This is the big 3/4 ounce model. I find that I can keep this on the surface and crank it at a slower pace than I can the smaller head knocker buzz baits. So, and this one doesn't have a trailer hook, but by all means put a trailer hook on your buzz bait to catch any of those short striking fish. Zero Spook is also awfully good. You can throw it in these same areas, lay down logs, in behind the docks, anywhere where you think a big fish might be laying. Twitch it, let it stop, twitch it, let it stop. If it is a female that has already spawned out, but she's still a pretty big fish, you want to move it a little bit slower so she has time to react to it. But Zero Spook is a good choice. Big spinnerbait's a good choice. You want to use one that has a big blade, big willow blade, because even the upper lake area, even though the water is usually dirty in the upper lake area, the water has cleared up. So you can go back to that big willow blade and throw that around any of the same type of cover that I mentioned, the spook and the buzzbait. Especially if you get on a windy point or something, you definitely want to throw the big spinnerbait. Still catching fish on the square bill. Still catching that on the channel banks on the square bill as these fish are kind of restaging up the next wave of spawners that are moving into spawn. But if you're going to throw one on the Big Bass Bash, this is the 1.5 KVD model. I like to throw this model. This one's in gizzard shad color. But I would recommend you throwing the 2.5. You're looking for a big fish. You're looking for one big bite for the whole weekend. So throw the big one. I catch more fish on the 1.5 version. Do catch some big fish occasionally, but my ratio of bigger fish seem to come on the 2.5 more than they do the 1.5. And then don't forget, the water temperature's warming up, so you can still throw worms. If you're not a good jig fisherman, but you can fish a worm, by all means fish a worm. This is a Zoom Magnum trick worm. You can Texas rig this, you can throw it on a shaky head, and then you've got the Berkeley power worms as well. Texas rig these Berkeley power worms. One of the techniques you can also use is a Carolina rig. And you could throw these big worms on a Carolina rig, brush hog, any of these type of baits. Underneath these spawning beds or spawning pockets, underneath these dock runways, you can also throw creature baits in there. And there's 100 different types of creature baits that you can use, getting from a brush hog all the way to some kind of a beaver style bait. You just want to use what you have confidence in and fish it. Today, we didn't mess around. We just used a jig. We caught all the fish we wanted to catch as far as on the jig. Here's what I would do if I was fishing the bass, and this is what I did when I was able to fish the bass. Most of the time when I fished the bass and cast a check, it was always on a buzzbait. Fished it early in the day, low light conditions, and then as the sun gets up or as fishing pressure gets heavier, it's going to pull a lot of those fish off the bank, and they're going to kind of gravitate back off. And what they're going to do, they're either going to go pull back underneath the dock, or if it's an open bank, they're going to pull back out off, and they're just going to kind of hang out off that first drop off from where they were located before. That's where you could go to a deeper diving crankbait if you want, maybe one that goes 8 to 12 feet. Might be a good choice. You can go to a heavier jig, Alabama rig is a good choice, but one of the best choices you can use is a Carolina rig. And on the end of that Carolina rig, put whatever you want to put on it. You can put big worms, you can put brush hogs, you can put creature baits. Carolina rig won the Big Bass Bash, the spring version within the last 2 or 3 years ago, and it was won on a crocodigator swamp bug senior, which is the bigger swamp bug. So just pick the bait you have confidence in and throw it. As far as the upper lake area goes, if you're going to be navigating before dark to your spots for the Big Bass Bash, you want to be a little bit careful. The channels are pretty much open. There's not a whole lot of debris floating in the channels as there has been in the years past, but there are still a log here and there that you'll see floating. So just be careful when you're traveling up the lake and do that. I don't know if the upper lake's going to get that much pressure from the bash this year, because one of the weigh-in spots that was at mile marker 50 at Red Fox is not being used this year. So the highest mile marker where there's a weigh-in is at mile marker 31, and my house sits at 55. So that's you got to be pretty sure you've got one to weigh in, because you can't just run down there and run back up as easily as you would if you had a weigh in just 5 miles away. So I hope I'm not forgetting anything on the Big Bass Bash. Like I said, just overall fishing conditions right now in the Upper Lake area, it's really good. Water visibility, you can see down about a foot. We got fish in behind the dock spawning. We got more fish waiting on those channel banks and those secondary points waiting to go into spawn. And so we got every fish, almost all the fish are usually pretty shallow right now. So good luck. I hope you catch a big one. I hope you win the big pot this weekend. And but most importantly, be safe and be courteous to other anglers, because there's going to be a lot of you out there, and it could be a lot of frustrations if you guys start cutting each other off. So be careful, good luck, and have fun.